Let's bring our viewers up to date. We talked about this last night, but just to remind everyone, the NDP is looking to change they want to change with their motion. And here's what they'll be debating tomorrow. I'll just show it to you. The NDP Opposition Day motion would amend the Election Canada Act for all future election campaigns. They want to strengthen Elections Canada's investigative capabilities, give the Chief Electoral Officer the power to request all necessary documents from political parties to ensure compliance with the Elections Act, make all telecommunication companies, these vendors that provide voter contact services, the calls during an election, register with Elections Canada. They don't now. Make all clients of telecom companies during an election register and then verify their identity. In other words, no more of these so-called Pierre Poutines. Dean Del Mastro, will the government support these changes?
Well, we've been clear, Evan. We are absolutely supporting and assisting Elections Canada in this regard and many others. Both the past Chief Electoral Officer and the current have indicated they have the investigative ability and authority that they require in this regard. But let's also take it a step farther. I mean, we have provided full transparency to Elections Canada, always have, always will. That's why the opposition parties know what each and every riding spent on any given thing that they did during an election, and the central party, because we provide that. But what we don't do is what the NDP does, is group a whole bunch of things in and call it miscellaneous. So as the Prime Minister said today, we look forward to the NDP providing this kind of transparency to Elections Canada, because we always have.
But I just have to ask you, this is a non-binding motion, so I guess, will the government follow through on this and actually put forward legislation to make this a binding motion so the support isn't symbolic, it actually becomes legitimate and real?
Well, as we've indicated, we are supporting and assisting Elections Canada. We've always provided them full transparency. The past and present Chief Electoral Officer have indicated that they do have the investigative ability and authority that they require to undertake their job. We have no problem supporting this because we believe that the opposition party should be providing the kind of transparency to Elections Canada that we have.
All right. What do you think about that, Pat Martin?
I don't know what it takes to knock Dean off his talking points. He might as well mail in his comments, because he doesn't seem capable of having a conversation. He just parrots the same tired, lame, exhaustive talking points. What we're trying to do with this motion is have a realistic look at whether the Elections Act as it currently stands is capable of keeping up with the changes in modern technology and developments. The last time we had a serious look at the Elections Act was really the Lortie Commission 23 years ago, back when campaigns consisted of lawn signs and leaflets in people's mailboxes. Obviously, there's been big changes, and I think we're very vulnerable unless we do have our Elections Act and our Elections Commissioner catch up to the times and put in some new safeguards and protections.
But they say they'll support it, so is that good enough?
Well, look at, he very, very carefully parsed words. I mean, you could analyze what he just said and it would just be gibberish, really. There's no commitment there. And let's face it, this is a motion. If it passed unanimously, all you could do is come back to the government sometime 18 months later and say, but you guys promised, you know, I'd rather hear something more concrete.
Motion.
I know. Well, I would rather hear something concrete from them saying, you know, something untoward occurred in the last election. It really does justify amending the Elections Act and changing the powers of the Elections Commissioner. That's what I'd like to hear him say, and he seems incapable of saying it.
All right, Frank Valeria, what's your view? Well, Elections Canada, do they need more power?
Listen, Evan, right now with the power they have, they still have to put together a pile of evidences, as you know, and present it to a court, as they did in Edmonton, and convince a judge to give them access to the documents that they need. No, they don't have the resources, and they don't have the powers that they need. They've been to this Parliament already, and they were denied those powers, and they were denied those resources at committee. And it was the Conservatives who blocked that.
They have the capacity to get whatever resources they need.
They're not allocated
any funds, but do they have power?
The powers they asked for at committee before were denied them, and that is frightening, actually, to think that they would be denied those those powers by committee. What's frustrating is that it is a non-binding motion. And what's further frustrating is that Dean, in his answer, said it's the Liberals and the NDPs that need to give their documents. He never once offered Conservative documents. Evan, you know that this is cross-country right now. It's gone from Saanich Gulf to Kingston to Cape Breton, and they keep standing up in the House with the very same lines. Let the others produce the documents. We have nothing to produce.
Well, when will the Liberals produce? Let's find out from you first. When will the Liberals actually produce the documents?
Yes, when, Frank?
We've offered the documents.
Yes, they have.
Okay,
That's
but
right.
when will we see the documents?
When?
Are you asking me or Dean?
Yeah, Frank Valeriat first. When will we see the documents?
Well, honestly, Evan, I'm not privy to what's happening right now in the production and the release of those documents. I can't give you an absolute answer.
Okay, so but the Liberals say they'll commit to doing it maybe next week. Bob Ray, again, NDP. When will we see documents from the NDP, Pat Martin?
Well, there's no hold up whatsoever that I know of, Evan. So as soon as is practically possible, we want to give and divulge all of our records. The only holdout that I know of is, in fact, the Conservative Party here.
Let's find out. Dean Del Mastro, will the Conservatives, and let me be careful in my question, I'm not asking will you cooperate with Elections Canada, you've said it. Will you divulge publicly the telephone records from the campaigns, as the other parties say?
What we have made very clear, Evan, and this is why, by the way, that the opposition parties are
kind of a yes or no
aware
answer, though.
Yeah.
It is a yes or no question.
We will
prefaces
provide
his
all
remarks.
documents to Elections Canada that they request. We have absolutely nothing to hide. We'll fully assist any investigation. We're aware of one, that is in the riding of Guelph. We understand the MP for Guelph is assisting as well. But let's be absolutely clear. We provide a level of transparency already that the opposition parties do not.
But hold on, and I recognize that, but you keep asking them to reveal their documents.
They can look at, well, because we're already providing a level of transparency that they do not.
Well, you're the only one that's being accused of election fraud.
Like the NDP, we don't rely on a box called miscellaneous and dump everything into it.
Well,
we provide transparency.
Hold on, let's get to the bottom of one thing about transparency.
Yeah.
When you look at election returns, one of the things we see is, for example, payments that go to individuals in certain ridings, $10,000, $24,000, which is a lot of money in a campaign. What we don't know in terms of the transparency, frankly, Mr. Del Mastro, is what that money exactly goes for. So you get the money, you see a payment's been made on the return, but we actually don't have a clue where that money goes. In other words, it could go anywhere. Will we get a level of return, of transparency to find out where that money actually goes?
So what we've also been clear with, Evan, as I've indicated many times, is that we did, in fact, we've never apologized for the fact that we called Canadians. In fact, on Election Day, we called Conservative supporters. We had firms contact Conservative supporters and encourage them to go vote Conservative in the election. We made some 6 million calls as a party. We've been very clear on this.
Those aren't the calls we're talking about.
And we've also, Evan, to be clear, in individual ridings, we also made calls. I made thousands of calls in my riding to encourage people to go out and vote. And that has occurred in each and every riding since Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. Any party that says otherwise is not being honest with the Canadian public.
Okay, but hold on. That's a lot. This 6 million is a fascinating number. That's a lot of calls. I think there's only 15 million households. So you're saying the Conservatives called 6 million houses. Now, as I understand it, you have to pay, maybe a robocall or a get out the vote call costs 50 cents, but a real person on the phone could cost up to $3. So let's square it off at $1 a call. Are you saying the Conservatives maybe paid $6 million to make those calls?
Well, what I can say, Evan, is I know for a fact in the last election we made as a party about 6 million calls. We've never hidden behind that. We've been out front and public about that. We used legitimate firms. We acted absolutely ethically, and we contacted Canadians from coast to coast to coast to encourage people to vote Conservative. As the NDP would have contacted people and encouraged them to vote NDP, as the Liberals would have contacted people.
Okay, let me hear Pat. Hold on. Let me hear Pat Martin and then Frank Valeriat. Pat Martin, your response to that.
Somebody made a lot of phone calls that were illegal. They phoned NDP and Liberal households and lied to them about that their voting station had changed. Those are the calls that we're after. But if we could, just for a second, go back to the Opposition Day motion tomorrow. The whole idea is it really traces from the fact people are making 6 million phone calls. the Elections Act and the enforcement of it has not grown with the times, as it were. It's a whole new world, a whole different ballgame. It needs a new set of rules, and I don't know why it would hurt. It's like pulling teeth to get Dean to actually admit that and say something proactive and positive instead of your talking point.
Okay,
I don't know what else I'd like to know.
Frank Valeri.
Evan, they did make that many calls, if not more, and those calls were first made to identify who was supporting the Conservative Party. And as soon as they declared that they were not supporting the Conservative Party, they got moved over to a list that were targeted on Election Day. That's exactly right. List number 2. There's Arnold Dodds from Kingston. Arnold Dodds from Kingston. Excuse me.
I cannot hear y'all. Frank Valeri, just a second. Frank Valeri, be very specific when you say there's a second list. What evidence do you have?
Arnold Dodds from Kingston called in to Ted Sue today to advise that he was a Conservative, and he identified the fact when the Conservatives called him that he would not be voting Conservative because they closed down the prison farms. And you know what happened to him on Election Day? He got a call misdirecting him to another polling location.
That's the pattern that's developing. I can verify that the people that got the phony calls got contacted by the Conservatives first. If you say, I vote a Conservative, you go on one list and you get pulled on Election Day. If you say, I don't vote Conservative, you go on the second list.
That's exactly
right. I got 10 seconds here for Dean Del Mastro. Dean Del Mastro, the opposition now alleging there are 2 lists on that. Can you confirm or deny that?
Do you track opposition votes?
I can absolutely clearly deny that the allegations that are just made are absolutely false. We contacted Conservative supporters to go out and vote Conservative, and we saw an extra 900,000 people vote in the last election. This is a lie. And you know what? At some point they will have to apologize, because the truth will come out on this, Evan.
Right.
And when it does, I expect you to call both these members on to apologize to our party, to our volunteers, and to the 6 million people who voted Conservative in the last election.
I'm going to close it down today, but allegations on all sides. That's Dean Del Mastro, Pat Martin, and Frank Valeri. And if you thought things are cooling down here, think again. There's a lot of allegations still going around. We are checking into it. I appreciate your time. You 3 gentlemen keep giving us. It's a very important issue, and I always appreciate you coming on. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Evan.